Hello, humans, and welcome back to another episode of RD2H Road to Happiness. Since the last time I recorded an episode, literally it feels like the world has gone to shit. It feels like there's fire all around us. Like, you know that one meme where it's like a dog sitting in a room and he's like, this is fine? That's how I describe our society right now. It's like literally nobody's doing anything and we're just sitting there laughing at the TV like nothing's wrong. But it's insane to me how bad things can get and just continue to get worse. And I knew it was going to happen with this year's 2024 election year. Like, we knew it was going to be a shit show walking into this thing, but it just is crazy. I think since the last episode, Trump's been shot. The Biden campaign has gone off. They replaced Biden with Kamala Harris. Just like the world seems to be falling apart. The country seems to be more divided than ever, and it almost feels like there's a lack of hope going around. Like, things aren't going to get better, which is insane because, you know, there's so much bad happening that I see that people who used to care and used to be, like, shocked that everything was happening, like, it's almost like we're getting desensitized to it because we're having so many bad things happen so fucking frequently, and it's like out of our control. We all feel helpless. We all feel like there's nothing that we can do about it, and so we just kind of like accept our own demise. And it's been a crazy thing to see, but I want to bring awareness to this because it's something that literally eats me up every single day, just seeing the country, seeing the people around me just not care or realize how bad things are actually getting. And today's episode, like I always say, RD2H is about finding our road to happiness. And some episodes are about finding our own personal road to happiness, figuring out life in our 20s, figuring out like who we are and what we want out of this life. But it also is a road to happiness on the greater picture of things, bringing awareness to things that maybe some of us are ignorant to or decide that they don't want to partake in. But for real change to happen in this world, for things to actually get better, it takes all of us tuning into what's happening. And I think with social media happening, like taking us by the throats, especially our generation, because when you think about it, we're the very first generation to have social media. And we're basically like test monkeys. And we're seeing the age, like the technological age, the emergence of social media, the emergence of, you know, different kind of social medias and everybody just recording their lives and throwing everything on the internet, and instead of actually living our lives watching it through a screen. That happened in the 2000s, which was when I was born. So my generation, people who are my age right now, we're the test monkeys, and they're seeing that like reflection. They're seeing that what happens when kids are constantly on the iPads, on social media, living through a lens, and we're the product of that. And I think that, you know, I was saying this to a friend the other day, it is a blessing and a curse to be part of this generation because we're constantly being consumed with so much brain rot. And honestly, I'm going to do an entire fucking episode on brain rot because I'm ready to like delete all social media. I'm actually like so up to here with the absolute garbage that I'm consuming on a daily basis, rotting in my bed, watching TikTok, watching other people live. Like, it is a literal addiction. It is something that like we cannot escape from in this age of technology. And I think it's only progressively getting worse. And it's like takes your serotonin away. It takes a lot from you. It stops you from being able to actually like explore the things that you want to do or feel boredom. It's not normal for humans to not feel boredom. And with all of this constant garbage in our face, we don't ever have to feel that. And what I was saying, though, was it's a blessing and a curse because on one hand, 90% of my generation is just consuming garbage on a day-to-day basis, consuming other people's very low opinions and just watching whatever they can watch to sit and brain rot and read. But on the other hand of that, I feel like it also opens a gate for a lot of opportunity if you're one of the people that is willing to take that serotonin detox and stop consuming all of this media that is trying to persuade you to be on one side or the other. And that's not just talking about politics or the way of the world. That's talking about everything, whether it be a certain mindset, toxic mindsets on social media or whatever. I think there's an opportunity here in front of us that if you're willing to, you know, stop consuming all of this garbage, like I said, you are already ahead of the game. If you're willing to take the steps to become a better person, to tune into what's happening in the world, to try to make a change, or to just do what is better for you to get to your best version of yourself, you're already ahead of the game, because 99% of us are sitting in front of a TV just consuming garbage. So I feel like with 99% of us, like, not working towards bigger goals, not thinking that we could do it, constantly being told on the internet that, you know, the retirement age went up and you're never going to be able to get that job no matter what degree you have. If you have a master's degree, you still won't be able to get the job. And just like this lack mindset that I'm seeing throughout all of our media, it's literally creating a generation of kids that are basically told that their dreams are too impossible, that it's too out there, that they're never going to get there because of one restraint or another restraint or the economy or whatever it is that they tell you, like, you'll never get there because of that. If you can just train your brain to think the opposite, if you can train your brain to say, yeah, everybody else is saying it's impossible, but I think it might be, I feel like you're already ahead of the game, because if 99% of us are sitting there saying it's impossible, that means 99% of people aren't trying. And if nobody's trying, competition gets a lot less. So I think that if you're willing to be one of the people in our generation that is willing to put the phone down and just fucking try, you already have a way better chance of making it, or making whatever goals that you want to happen, because most of us are just sitting there, woe is me, not doing anything about it. So like I said, it's a blessing and a curse to be raised in this generation. But more than ever, I think that we need different media that is coming up, different media, different things being told to us than what is happening. Because when we all accept that, you know, the world is on fire and it's never going to get better and it's never going to change and there's nothing that we can do about it, we're accepting our own fate. We're accepting our own demise. And it just takes a few people out there to decide that's bullshit. That's fake news. That's something that I'm just not willing to accept. And if I can do something about it, if I could do something about my future, I'm going to do that. And so, like I said, this is not just about you finding your road to happiness. It's about you finding purpose and impact and how you're going to make that impact on the world. And that's what I try to push on this podcast at RD2H, because I don't think there's enough of that out there. There's not enough hope. And I think that we need more hope. But I'm going to start this episode with going over a couple current events, going over things that have been happening just worldwide and everything that's been going on. And I'm going to go a little bit into everything that you guys have missed out on since the last time I talked to you guys, and things that I've been learning throughout, you know, this journey that we call life. Because I'm a big believer that every single experience that you go through, every single thing that happens to you, it's for a purpose. It teaches you a lesson, and you might think it's nails on a fucking chalkboard and that why is this happening to me right now and why do I deserve this? But it's not about your shitty situations happening to you because you deserve it. It's about, what can this teach me? Why am I going through this struggle? Because there is no getting to this, you know, ideal version of yourself, getting to this other side. There's no making the world a better place without struggle. You know, we live in a world of duality. Everything has two sides in this, like, weird dimension that we live in. There is no happiness without sadness. There is no, you know, victory without struggle. There's two sides to everything, you know. And I think that we forget that, and we hold on to the good moments so hard that we, like, just hate to deal with the bad moments. But the bad moments are what give us an opportunity to pivot, give us an opportunity to grow, and give us an opportunity to become somebody better than we were yesterday. Because what is the point of life if you're the same person you were 5 years ago? Like, what are we doing here then? If you're not changing, if you're not trying to, you know, tweak and fix mistakes, then there's no point. So I think that a big lesson for me has been that everything has two sides to it, and there's no experiencing the good without the bad. But with the economy, with the world, with the political things happening right now, it feels like there's more bad than good. It feels like there's a lack of hope going on. And it's just really hard to see and bear all of that, you know, hopelessness feeling, that feeling of like, I can't do anything to change the way things are. But I refuse to accept that things are the way that they are. That is just like unacceptable. Like there's no way things can't get better, but it takes each and every one of us tuning in and doing our fucking part to get to that point. A quote that I wanted to share with you guys is, "The essence of America, that which really unites us, is not ethnicity or nationality or religion, it's an idea. And that idea is that we can come from humble circumstances and still do great things." And that goes back to like what I was just saying. Humble circumstances, it doesn't matter where you come from or what kind of education you have or what kind of family background you have or any of that. You know, the American dream is the idea that you can come from nothing, absolutely nothing. And if you have the determination and the self-discipline, you can get where you want to go. And I think that a big part of what's happening right now is we're losing that idea. We're losing that hope. We're losing that that hope that we can become something from nothing. And if everybody loses that, nothing's going to change. And if nothing changes, the world keeps going the way it's going, it's going to be back to the 60s. And I think that a big analysis that I've been making in my head lately is the fact that we are going back to the 60s. If you do the parallel between the 1960s and their generation and our generation, it's almost identical, except we have fucking cameras to be able to record what's happening. It's like we're actually on our phones watching everything fall apart and able to like have live footage of it, and we're not doing anything. And so the parallel between the 60s, and honestly I might get like way into just talking about the political side of the world instead of, you know, personal things like I do on other episodes, but the parallel on the 60s that I've been seeing is, you know, history repeats itself. But do we actually know what that means when we say history repeats itself? Like, are we understanding that it's the same circumstances, it's just a different generation? And like, we can start with the assassination, and this is not in a time order, but we can start with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, JFK. And that was in like 1964, I want to say. It's 1964 and 1963. But JFK was assassinated, shot in the head in a public scene. And if you go on YouTube, you can even watch those videos. It's a crazy thing to see. And then we had the recent attempted assassination of Donald Trump, which you can say what you want about that. I don't think that it was a setup. A lot of people are saying that it was a setup, saying that it was fake news, saying that, you know, he did that to rig the election. And I say it on every podcast, I'm neither Democrat or Republican. I think that for this country to actually change in the way that I hope it will one day, we need a middleman. We need somebody that can bring Republican ideas and Democratic ideas into office, because there's a reason why there's two parties. They both bring things to the table. I think Republicans are more about security, obviously conservatism, where the Democrats are social issues. And where we need social issues, we also need security. There needs to be a mix of the two. And with the country being so divided right now, I think that our biggest, you know, enemy is ourselves. Like, if anybody's going to tear this nation apart, it's ourselves right now. And the thing is that, you know, we see ourselves as this indestructible thing, the United States of America, right? One nation under God. But we are a giant empire, and empires rise and fall. And we see that throughout history, right, too. Do you ever think that the Romans thought that they would collapse one day? No, the Romans thought that, you know, they were the fucking Roman Empire. They brought so many different things to us, different values, ideas that we still use today. And yet the Roman Empire still fell. And we're no different. We're one big ass empire that thinks that we're indestructible. And again, throughout history, anytime that anybody thinks something is indestructible or foolproof, it collapses. For example, again, we thought that Titanic was never going to sink. It would never happen in a million years, and yet it sunk. You know, they literally said it was unsinkable. It sunk. And I think that's the irony of things. When humans get a little bit too cocky, we get put in our place. And that's my fear right now, is that I'm watching us get put in our place, right? Another great quote that I've said on the podcast before is, the United States is always one generation away from losing democracy. And I, again, think that was either Ronald Reagan or John F. Kennedy that said that. But I mean, it's looking like this generation. And like I said, in the 60s, they had the assassination. The 60s also was fighting for women's rights, which was very, huge for us to get Roe versus Wade passed. And then the Dodd case reverse that. So we're seeing, again, in the 60s, they were fighting for social rights. They were fighting for our abortion rights. And again, here in 2024, we're fighting for the same rights. We're fighting for the same abortion rights. I feel like women's rights have gone back almost a full generation since, in these last couple years. And another one is the fact that we're scared that we're on the brink of war. Back then, it was the Vietnam War where a lot of, young kids that would be my age right now, were fighting for, they were doing protests. They were fighting for the Vietnam War to go away. And right now, I see the same thing in our generation, except it's fighting for a ceasefire on Palestine. And so, again, we're seeing the same events happen again and again and again, and we're acting like it's new. But in reality, the society we live in is no different from the societies they lived in. We just have technology. We call this the modern age, but I like to say it's not the modern age at all. It's the same product in a prettier package. And we're just fucking over consumers, right? We're just gobbling up that prettier package, but it's the same garbage product. And I think that we need change more than fucking ever. And another great parallel that I noticed between us in the 60s is the student protest. We saw the student protest happen with the Palestine movement, where all these college kids decided that, what they were seeing wasn't right, and they protested against it. There's the same student protest for the Vietnam War, where we see college students, doing the same acts on the campus and getting arrested for it. And I think that protest was a very big one because it outlines that, you have freedom of speech until they don't like what you're saying. And I think that if our freedom of speech gets taken away, there's no hope. Right there. There's no hope for society if we're not able to say the things we want and bring light to the things that we see are going on in society and what is wrong with the world. And I think that with the government and with all of the protests and everything, like I said, it's, we have a say and we can say what we want and we can try to influence until it gets to a point where our influence isn't aligning correctly with what that 1% wants or with what that secret cabinet wants. It's scary. It's dead right scary to see, those college kids get arrested, see the same things that we went through in the 60s. The only difference between us and the 60s is I think that they were, trying to implement change just a little bit more than we are. I mean, not that we're not trying to implement change. I think that there's just too many of us that see the world and see how many problems are going on and feel hopeless, even if they do want to care, and just turn down the TV, put on the brain rot instead of putting on the current events. And that's what they want. I mean, that's genuinely what they want. They want you to scroll on TikTok and doom scroll and lose brain cells so that you are submissive, so that you don't, uprile when injustices are happening. And I want to bring attention to that. I want to bring attention, even if I can't make a change, even if I can't change the entire world, I'm one person, I can get you guys to start thinking about it. I can get you guys to start saying, you know what, it is a little fucked up. Let me figure out what's happening. Let me tune in, because that's what it's going to take. All of us tuning the fuck in, right? Another great world event that happened since last episode was the Microsoft crash at the airports. And, if you weren't at the airports, you probably don't give a fuck, right? You're whatever, I wasn't traveling. I know a lot of friends that were traveling that day when all of the Microsoft softwares crashed down. And, I got some friends that were stuck halfway across the world. I have some friends that were stuck in LA, different states, and they had to spend money or stay extra nights or whatever. But that's not the point. If you were not traveling during the time of the Microsoft crash, you just probably looked at your phone and you're like, damn, the softwares went down. That sucks. Put your phone back down. But what brought my attention to that is the fact that there's no backup systems. Like I said, we're a technology-based society right now. 99% of what we do is through softwares. It's through technology. It's through some kind of, electrical shit. And I think that the no backup systems is just highlighted for me the fact that, all it would take is them turning off the Wi-Fi for like a week. Isn't that fucking scary? Like, all it would take is them shutting down our system, shutting down our Wi-Fi, shutting down our internet, and within a week, we'd go into full chaos. And I think the airport systems very much like highlighted that, is the fact that, there was no backup systems in place. How in this entire fucking world is there no backup systems to the technology we use? No manual, protocols. And I think that was like a little bit of a scary moment for me too. Not because, yes, the airports were bad and everything, people's travel plans got fucked up, but on the bigger scale, that doesn't matter. I think what really matters is the fact that we're so heavily based on technology and we don't even like really understand it. If you're an average person, you don't understand how these systems work. Yet all of our money is stored in electronical systems. All of our, work stuff, all of our information, everything. We live off of these systems. Yet if they shut down, we have nothing to rely on. And that's just dumb, in my opinion. It's fucking stupid. It's like asking for chaos. And I think that we need to be aware of that too. Like the monetary systems, I think less than 10% or something like that. I don't know the exact statistic of money is actually cash now. Everything is in the systems. If the bank systems went down, everybody would be fucked. And not to be like that person that's like the end of the world is coming, the end of the world is coming. But I think that, these are conversations that we need to be having in order to direct the future generations to honestly not end up like us. Like, I love my generation. We have put so much work into the Palestine movement and so much work into actually implementing change. But we're also like so, in my opinion, brainwashed to the crap that we're constantly being fed. And I'm going all over the place with this episode. But again, with Kamala Harris being elected, again, I'm not Republican or Democratic. But I've got to say, like, if you think that the world is to shit right now and you're going to vote for Kamala Harris, then the world's going to be a shittier place than it is right now. And you can hate me, you can love me for saying that. I mean, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I will say that this country has been ran by Biden for the last 4 years. And in the last 4 years, what have we seen? We've seen like the economy crash. People can't afford groceries. People can't afford rent. Student loans are like unable to be grasped right now. We almost went to war. We're on the brink of World War III. And a large part of that is the fact that we had a president that was 90 years old, fucking ancient, and with dementia, and he wasn't running the country. And if you think he was running the country, you're one of the people being brainwashed right fucking now. I don't even care. You're one of the people being brainwashed if you think that Biden-Harris was running this country, because he was not. He was either a secret cabinet behind him, the faceless people, and that's what you should be scared of. The faceless people behind the presidents. The people, like, actually making the calls, because he was not making the call. My thing with Kamala Harris being elected is the fact that she was our vice president for the last 4 years. And again, Biden had dementia. Let's get that so fucking clear right now. He was not in the mental capability to be running the country. So I believe that there was a secret panel of people that were running it for him. And who would have been leading that secret panel? Kamala Harris, because she was our VP. She was the second man right behind Biden. So if anybody was making some shitty shots, she must have had something to do with it, right? And you can agree with her policies and you can agree with the way that she's going to change social issues, but you are not looking into the economy correctly, and you're not looking into the actual effects that's going to be presented if she is elected in office. And, you know, if you listen to my podcast, I'm all for woman empowerment. I'm all for, you know, just be like, you can do everything a man can do and more. In fact, emphasis on the fucking more. But the thing is, just because she is a black woman doesn't mean that she's going to make a great president. Doesn't mean that she should be in office. And especially when you get to that level where you are being elected to, you know, lead an entire nation, you shouldn't be elected just off the pretense of your biology or your ethnicity. Like, being the first black woman president is not a reason to elect somebody in office. And I'm afraid for the economy, honestly. There's two things that this presidential election is having me stay awake up at night. And those two things are, one, the economy, because it's been such shit in the last couple of years. And if you don't know, I'm a finance major, so I do know how to, look at those charts and measure them. And I feel like with Kamala being in office, it's only going to get worse. She has like this socialistic kind of view on the world, the way that the changes that she wants to make. And I feel like the further that, she is in office, the further our economy is going to get diminished. If you don't think you can afford groceries now, just wait for 4 years. That's all I have to say. Like, literally wait in 4 years and you'll be wishing we had anybody else. And I'm also afraid for the brick of World War III. Like, honestly, again, with Biden in office, we were this fucking close to World War III. And I don't think people understand the gravity of what happens if we go to World War III. And again, I was saying the parallel with the 60s, they enacted the draft in the 60s. And a lot of people like to say, oh, well, we haven't had a draft enacted since the 60s, so we don't really need to worry about that. But you have to, honestly wake up and join the real world and realize that the 60s wasn't that long ago. If the only history, and a lot of us, it's nothing to be ashamed of, but if the only history that you've ever consumed or researched in your life is the history from high school textbooks, it's crazy to see how those textbooks are skewed. Like, as soon as I graduated from high school and I started, going to college, I started researching things on my own. I started to actually dive into the internet and find different sources other than the ones that the United States government provides us. You find that the information that is given in high school and those textbooks are so skewed. It's disgustingly skewed. Even there's pictures in black and white that were taken in color, but they put it in the textbook as black and white, so you feel like it was a really long time ago. And I remember being little and reading those textbooks, and a lot of those textbooks are on the slave times and on the abolishment of slavery and civil rights and equality and all of that, because that is the fight that our last generation was fighting and the fight that our generation is still fighting. Don't get me wrong, we are still fighting that fight, but I think it's crazy to see that they skew history and information for you to feel like it was so long ago. And I remember being little and reading those textbooks, and I remember being so thankful that I was born in a different generation. I was like, wow, I can't believe that things got so shitty and were so bad and so evil, and I'm just grateful that I am in this new generation where things are fixed now. And then you get a little bit older, you grow up, and you realize, like I said, nothing's changed. I mean, we're fighting the same fights. It's the same product in a different box. I mean, nothing has changed at all. And it's almost saddening to because I remember looking at the textbooks. I remember reading all of the history, and I remember thinking that I was just so happy that that was the past. And they teach it to you as if yes, this is our past, but we're better than that now. And then you grow up and you realize that nothing's changed and we're not better than that. And the point of that was just the fact that the 60s wasn't that long ago, and we're reliving the exact same time right now, and I want to bring attention to that because you can't change what's happening unless you're aware of it. And that doesn't just go for the world or politics. I say it all the time on this podcast. It goes for you as an individual too. You can't change your lifestyle. You can't change your behaviors. You can't change your reactions to things unless you sit there with some self-awareness and really analyze and realize what it is that needs to change. Because you're not going to get a new answer by trying the same steps. You're not going to solve the problem by repeating the same steps that you repeated over and over again. You're not going to make change without implementing new habits. Old habits do not lead to new roads. And again, that goes on a wide-scale world view and on an individualistic view. So, it's just crazy to me that, some of us are like, oh, the draft hasn't happened till the 1960s. It won't ever happen again. And it's that kind of, thinking that is going to lead us to our demise. Is that kind of, ignorance of it won't happen again, or we're safe, or things are fine. It's gonna lead us to the same outcome that we saw in the 60s, which is the draft. And like we see, we were so close, and the only reason that we don't feel the fear of World War III right now, and we're not sitting here like, oh, we're on the brink of it, is because of the election. The election has kind of shifted the media from everything that was happening overseas to everything that's happening, in our nation, because the world was on fire before this election with everything happening overseas, and we're like, literally the world's going to shit and we're going to go World War III. And then the election happened, or the election year is happening right now, and then we started to have so many domestic issues and so many domestic chaos happening that it kind of shifted our view from a global scale to a domestic scale. And with that, you kind of forget about the other issues, right? But it's still happening. Everything overseas is still happening. It's just things are falling apart right here in the United States as well as globally now, which is even scarier. But, like I was saying, the next step, if we keep taking these steps towards basically our fucking downfall, is World War III. And what happens if World War III happens? And that's why I'm like not against Kamala Harris, but like, I'll be honest, she doesn't have my vote, because I feel like with her in office, we are not going to have the security that we need, the authority that we need, or the movement to stop the issues happening overseas. And my biggest fear in this country right now is World War III in the next 4 years. And my biggest reason for that is the draft. And I urge you to do some research on the draft, figure out how that happened in the 60s, because it's going to be our 18-year-olds. It's going to be the kids. It's going to be the freshly out of high school students. It's going to be, our children. And it's going to be your neighbors. It's going to be your brothers. It's going to be your cousins, your friends. Those are the people that get drafted. And what sickens me the most is that when I'm around people in real life, and I bring this up, and I talk like about politics with my friends. I talk about world issues with pretty much everybody around me. And I think the worst reaction that I receive is when I talk about these fears of mine, when I talk about, me seeing the country going down this road, they like to say, oh, well, my boyfriend's in college, so he won't get drafted. Or thankfully, my brother is old enough that he won't get drafted. And it's human nature to be selfish like that. It's human nature to only care about things that affect you directly. But how fucking sickening is that to be like, oh, well, if all these 18-year-old children get drafted, I mean, that's what they are, kids sent off to war. At least it's not my boyfriend, or it's not my brother. So, like, I don't need to really care about it because it's not somebody I'm close with. When we keep that kind of mindset, when we keep talking in that way, when we keep that view on the world, yeah, I mean, what's going to happen is the absolute worst fucking global disaster. Because if you only care about what's happening to you and you're not seeing that every one of us is affected by what's happening in this nation right now, every single one of us is affected in some way. And if that's not something that you care about and you're going to say, only it doesn't affect me, so whatever, I mean, that's absolutely disgusting. There's no other word for that other than disgusting, to think that you only care about the people close to you. I mean, it's a nation. I think the World War II had the most deaths in history. I think it's like 2 million or something like that. It was the most bloodshed in a war. And with all of our technologies and everything that's, we've developed, whether it be nuclear warfare or, missiles or drones or whatever it is that is now implemented in our military, if you think that World War III won't have bigger casualties than World War II, you're out of your fucking mind. It's going to be an absolute bloodshed. And I just don't think that we're really thinking this through. And I want you guys to think about that when you vote, because I think the biggest thing that we need out of this election, like, yes, groceries, 100%, the economy, money, inflation, all of that. But my biggest thing is I just want to avoid World War III, because again, the way that they draft, if you did not know this already, is you have you're enlisted in the draft, and you get your birthday pulled out of a lottery. They have like literally a lottery thing, and if your birthday gets pulled out, everybody with that birthday gets sent out to war, and you're dead. Like, there's no nice way to put that. You're fucking dead. It's terrible. I mean, literally, that you get a death certificate if they pull your birthday out of a hat. And I think that's worst case scenario, but I think we need to be thinking about that in this election, thinking about what those kids went through in the 60s, what they were fighting for. And a big part of the 60s, they call the 60s the generation that almost was. And the reason that they do that is because the 60s implemented so much change for us. They implemented, the Roe versus Wade, which was the abortion act. They fought for our rights. They had protests for civil rights. They moved us into the modern age. And if it wasn't for the people who dedicated their lives to the movements in the 60s, we wouldn't even be able to consider ourselves in the modern age, because we only consider ourselves to be modern era because of these changes that we were gifted and born with, and when we came into this generation, because of what that generation did. Yet, the more I grow up, the further I get into, politics and watching what's happening in the world and just growing up in general, I'm seeing all of the work that they did get diminished. And it's literally heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see and to think that my kids are going to grow up in a world that is shittier than the world that I grew up in. An economy that is worse, a government that is worse, policies that are worse. And my daughters are going to grow up in a state that is ultimately worse than the one that I grew up in. And that is not the way that evolution is supposed to occur, right? We're supposed to be getting better with every generation, but I'm not seeing that right now. And I mean, it's terrifying. There's no other word for that. But I also don't want to, throw in like Armageddon, the world is ending, because the only way that things get better is if a majority of us believe that it can get better, if we fight for that. And like I was saying, 60s are the generation that could have been, and they call them that because they had all these movements, they got us going on the right track, they were changing the world one person by at a time. And what ultimately ended the 60s was the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And when he was assassinated, almost all of those movements ceased, and it was just like the dust settled, and we were able to enjoy all of the rights that were gifted to us from the fights they fought. But the fights kind of ended, and we accepted, current circumstances once Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed. And I think that's a big part of human behavior as well, is the fact that we just need enough to be submissive. We just need enough of, money in order to not outlash. We need enough security to not, protest. We need a certain amount of things being okay for us to not take to the streets and protest, and they try to keep us right there at that level. And what we're seeing lately in this election year, in the last couple of years, pretty much from 2020 to 2024 is where we're seeing this big movement and change happening in our generation. And what's happening with that is we're not getting enough. The government and the politicians and the society and the people in general don't feel safe enough. And that's where we're getting the outlash. But my question to everybody is, why does shit literally need to hit the fan? Why does the world need to be on fire for us to start implementing change? Why does it need to get to that point? And we're at that point right now, and that's when change actually happens. But I'm hoping that with RD2H, I inspire some of you and some other people to start thinking that it takes one person. It literally takes one person. And whether that's me, you, your friend, whatever you do does help the greater picture. And if you're willing to sit there and say that you're capable of doing it, you're already beating everybody else. Everybody's sitting there with a lack mentality saying the world is shit, but they're hopeless and they have no control. The moment that you decide to take some control, you're already putting us in a better position for the future. And I think that it is, our job as Gen Z to start to think like that and to put ourselves in a better part for the future, because it's the younger generations that are actually able to see what is wrong with the world and implement that change. So that's like the main message that I want to push on this episode, that you might be one person, but you are capable of caring and putting your best foot forward and trying to make change happen. And we see that throughout history as well. It always starts with one person. It takes one person to stand up and to say, you know, this is the way things are, but I don't accept it. And just one person does that, and that's where we see the change. And with the 60s, theirs was Martin Luther King Jr., and when he was assassinated, that was like almost all hope gone for that generation. And I don't want us to be the generation that could have been. I want my kids to grow up in a place that is safer and better than the one I grew up in. And it just seems to be diminishing day by day and getting worse. Another great quote is by Abraham Lincoln, and it says, "America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves." And that was something that Abraham Lincoln said back in the day. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. I mean, that's literally what's happening in the world right now. And I think, again, a big part of it is we're being decentralized. We have our phones out. We're constantly scrolling. We're seeing this terrible news. We're seeing it so much because, like, you know, big events happen. For example, Trump attempted assassination, or all of the children being killed in Gaza. And you're on TikTok and you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're seeing it so fucking much that it loses its impact. You kind of get desensitized to it. And it's almost like, yeah, it sucks, but you get used to it. And I don't know, that's not something that I want to get used to. Fucking lines of children's clothing all down the beach representing one child that died for every fucking shirt, and it's miles long. I don't want to get used to it. And it's a scary world that we can get used to stuff like that. And I think that we're being so decentralized that it's almost like nobody wants to make a change, or not that we don't want to make a change, that we don't know how to. We have a government that's not listening to us right now. We have candidates that are terrible. Again, I'm neither Democratic or Republican. I don't support Kamala Harris, and obviously that means my vote's going for Trump. But I do think that, isn't it fucking ridiculous that these are the two best candidates? I mean, that right there is a system malfunction, because we have millions of Americans, millions that have gone to college, that have pursued politics, that are pursuing politics currently because they want to make a change, and our two best candidates are Trump and Kamala Harris. Like, that is just insane to me. It's almost like, I mean, it's a rigged system. You have to know the right people, you have to be in the right rooms, but there needs to be some kind of reform, some kind of change, because like I said with the Abraham Lincoln quote, if we get destroyed, it's ourselves. And I think right now the country's more divided than ever. And again, history repeats itself. If you look through the history books, every time that the country is as divided as it is right now is when we're in trouble, when we're out, almost collapse. And if we can't make a change, if we can't start talking to each other as the people and come together on common ideas the way the people in the 60s did, it's not going to get better. And I truly believe that. I think it takes us getting on the same page, having the conversations, talking about the things that we don't want to talk about, because it doesn't get better unless the people unite. I mean, we're living in a world where YouTubers like Mr. Beast are doing more for society and for helping others than our politicians. And again, that's absolutely disgusting. And I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to say that I know how we can make that reform. I'm not going to say that I know how things can get better, but I know that they can get better, because there's no way that this is the world that we settle with and we just sit here and we say it's okay until we walk into a war zone. There's no way that we just accept what's going on and we accept that this is our fate. I mean, it isn't until we decide that it's happening, but I don't fucking accept it, that things are going to change. And again, I don't have all the answers, but I do know that if we're not having these conversations as a generation, as Gen Z, as the new, 20-year-olds, we're never going to be able to get to the place that we want to go. And like I was saying with the 60s, we saw the movement of the hippies happening with the 60s, you know, everybody, even the war on drugs. And a big part of the war on drugs was just the fact that everybody was fucking dying because we were enacting a drought. The politicians only gave a fuck about themselves. They were being controlled. We were going into a society that, you know, didn't have freedoms. And what do you do when you have no hope? You take a lot of drugs and you just live your fucking best life. And that's what we're seeing right now. Like, we're literally seeing it repeat. We're seeing kids that are like, oh, I have no ability to make change. I have no way to fix the world, and there's nothing that I can do. So I'll just take a bunch of drugs and I'll go out and party and live our best life. But in a way, that's kind of like a freeing kind of thing, because that's when we saw the hippie era. We saw, you know, the hippie movement and all of those like free spirited people. And those people have a place in the world. I mean, there's nothing better than a free spirit. There's nothing better than, you know, saying fuck the system and living for authenticity. And we're seeing that kind of repeat right now with this generation. We're seeing it on TikTok. We're seeing, you know, people being like, fuck the system, fuck politics, fuck the government, you know, live freely, live authentically, be you. And I think that's a default for when things get so bad. And I think that it is helpful because it leads to those realizations of change and that movement of change. But it's also a very big, like, linear pattern that has also been happening throughout history, where we see the 60s had that big revolution and those kids like fighting for peace. And it's kind of coming back around right now, you know, the hippie era, this generation, I would like say we call us ravers, or we call us like other stuff or whatever. But that hippie kind of mindset of, you know, peace, free will, living authentically, living your best life, it's making its way back around due to the fact that everything else is going to shit. And I think that when we're able to see those parallels throughout history, when we're able to make those connections of, oh, wait, this has happened before, but it's just happening a little bit differently now, you're able to like truly fix it. You can't, like, if we're doing the same patterns and not having the realizations that history is repeating itself, we're going to fall into the same patterns, and it's going to end the same way as, you know, it did in the 60s. And I think that this might get me a little bit canceled, and that's fine. But, you know, between Kamala Harris and Trump, we have to realize that, like, yes, Trump has his issues and he's very controversial, but you have to realize that back in 2020, what were we fighting for? Right now, we're fighting for basic fucking rights. We're fighting for women to have abortion rights. We're fighting for no fucking World War III. We're fighting for groceries. We're fighting for affordable housing. We're fighting for basic necessity needs. And back in 2020, when Trump was in office, what were we fighting for then? We were fighting for social rights. We were fighting for transgender rights. We were fighting for black rights. Which have made a huge improvement in the last 4 years. And if you can't see that improvement, that's on you, because it has made a giant improvement in the last 4 years. And that fight is nowhere near over. But we have to recognize when our fights have done something. And with all those protests in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement, like, it may seem insignificant in the moment, but when a million people join the boat and they make something, you know, important, it does make a change. And that Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, like, whatever your opinions are on it, made a change. Like, visibly, I have seen a difference in the culture in the United States due to that. And it takes a group of people banding together over a cause to implement societal change like that. And so, back on what I was saying, we were fighting for social rights in 2020. But I don't think that my generation really understands what a privilege it is to fight for social rights. And yes, like, in an ideal utopia, we all have, you know, free will, free rights. We're all equal. And that's what we're fighting for. And that's what generations are going to be fighting for, equality. And where I don't know if we're going to come to a place of full equality within my generation. I know that if my generation continues to have this talk and continues to fight for it, within 2 to 3 generations, it is possible to have some kind of world peace, to have some, even if it's just within our nation, to have some kind of, utopia kind of society, if we're continuing to fight for it within the generations and pushing for that. But back to what I was saying, back when Trump was elected, we were fighting for social issues. And that is a privilege, because the fact that we were able to sit there and fight for transgender rights, fight for Zems, fight for, these ideas and push these progressive, like, socialistic views, what was meaning that we had already had our basic needs taken care of. Because if you don't have a roof over your head, if you don't have groceries, if you don't have money to fill your gas tank up, you're going to be fighting for that over fighting for, Zems, or fighting for transgender rights or equality rights or whatever. So in my opinion, Trump being in office, you can say that the economy was doing well enough that we felt that there was room on the table in our political debates to push that. And I'm not saying that it's bad that we push that. I'm saying that we have to look at how good the economy was in 2020. The fact that those were the fights that we were having, those were the conversations we were having. Where right now in 2020, if you hop on, or in 2024, if you hop on TikTok, if you hop on Instagram, if you hop on, social media, nobody gives a fuck about the Zems right now. And I'm sorry to say it, but we don't, because what we care about is having enough groceries in our kitchen, having roofs over our head, having enough money to survive. That is the fight we're currently fighting. Being able to, have a say over what happens on our bodies, That's the fight we're fighting. We're fighting for basic fucking needs right now. And we just don't have room on the table for the socialistic debates that we had in 2020. So I think that right there just shows that the economy was better in 2020 than it was in 2024. Because in 2024, we're all struggling financially so much, and the nation's divided, and the economy's collapsing, and we're on the brink of World War III, and we're scared for our sons and for, our brothers. And that means that right now we're at a poorer state than we were in 2020, because the conversations changed, right? And we can see that. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're back in 2020. Those weren't the issues we were fighting. We were fighting for, moving our society from one level to the next level, fighting for equality, fighting for, a better generation. And now the last 4 years, we've taken so many steps back that we're now not even fighting the new fight for equality. We're fighting the old one. The fight that we already fought, we're fighting it again. And I think that is a big part of this election that we need to understand, is the fact that we were even having those conversations back in 2020 means that we were better off with Trump in office. You can have whatever opinions you want about Trump, but at the end of the day, we were having those conversations then. We had food on our tables. We had roofs over our heads. We were in a better economy, and we were in a place where we could start to think about what's the next step? What's the next, fight? How do things get better? Where now we're just thinking about, how do we survive? And again, I hope to get to a place one day where my kids are growing up in a place that is better than the one I grew up in. But I'm looking at it, and as of now, in the last 4 years, we went from being able to have those talks and be the generation that makes change to now we're just fighting the same fight that has been fought for over 60, 70 years. And if Kamala Harris is in office, it's only going to get worse, and we're going to continue to fight that fight. And I would personally like to get back to a place where we can start talking about equality again, start talking about social issues, start talking about, individual lives and how we can make them better rather than being in a state of survival. And that's where we're seeing this country go right now. So that's where I'm going to wrap up this episode, RD2H Road to Happiness. Again, this episode was more on the political side. It's not always on the political side. With RD2H Road to Happiness, I aim to help you guys find yourselves and find the kind of life that you want to live and find your purpose and, make your own road to happiness, because you're never going to get to the place you want to get to if you don't know who you are. If you don't know where you are going, you're never going to get there. And so RD2H stands for that, building your own road to happiness, but it also stands for finding a road to happiness on a worldview too, on a wide scale, being part of the conversation. We talk about politics here, finance, lifestyle, mentality, psychology, pretty much anything that you can think of to make me, you, and the world a better person, because it's all about being a better person tomorrow than you were today. And if you can do that, then you are already beating 99% of the people out there. So follow me on all the social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. All of it is at RD2H Podcast. And I will see you guys back for another episode next week. Love you all. RD2H, Road to Happiness. Bye.